All right, I'm going to kick us off. Thanks everyone for coming, actually. I expected less people considering happy hour is about to start. That's our standard disclaimer, you've seen it 1,000 times. Essentially, anything we say may change. We hope it doesn't, but it could. I'm Doro. I'm one of the product managers on the Jira Service Management team. Look after after assets specifically on the cloud side, but I do collaborate very closely with our data center colleagues as well. Co-presenting with Amol, who some of you may have met. He's from our developer experience or developer advocate team. And also our talk today, it's about Jira Service Management, assets in Jira Service Management, and the combination of assets with the platform power of Forge, and how that can help you build apps that really supercharge our customers' asset management practices. We have structured this talk into 4 parts. So starting with a bit of an overview of assets in Jira Service Management, or JSM assets for short, as well as our take on asset management at Atlassian more broadly. So that's particularly for those that aren't super familiar with assets, but also to give you a bit of an idea of how we talk to our customers about assets and asset management at Atlassian. I'll then throw over to Amol, who will take us through the developer experience and how to build apps for assets on Forge. He'll also walk us through a number of resources to help you get started and what you can find if you're really keen to build, which you hopefully will be. And then we'll wrap up with a quick summary of the key takeaways and considerations. If we have time, we'll do a bit of Q&A, but if not, because I know happy hour waits, we'll hang around here, but we'll also be over there, so please come and chat to us directly. So as I said, I'd like to start by going through a little bit of a broader look at asset management and how we think of it at Atlassian. And let's do so by going through some of the definitions that ITIL puts out there. So starting with asset management itself, which ITIL defines as the practice that helps the organization manage, control, and protect its IT assets and the IT services that use them. And the second definition I'd like to go through is that of a CMDB, or configuration management database, because assets does fill the function of a CMDB natively in Jira Service Management, although it does go beyond this, and we'll circle back to that a little later. But ITIL defines a CMDB as a database of configuration items, or CIs, and the relationships within the IT infrastructure of an organization. But we at Atlassian, we have a slightly different take on these definitions, or we think they might be a touch too narrow. Which is what's influencing our unique approach to asset management. And that approach is influenced by a number of key trends that we're seeing in the market. Starting with the definition of an asset itself, where, as you've seen, ITIL limits asset management to IT assets and IT services that use them. So typically what first comes to mind when you think about what's an asset, that's things like laptops and software and routers. And yes, that's absolutely relevant, but what we're seeing is that there's a shift happening where IT service management, or ITSM, is being superseded by enterprise service management, or ESM for short. And with that, we're seeing service management practices, and specifically asset management, being increasingly adopted by organizations across the entire business. So it's not just IT that needs to practice this, but it's really any department that has things that needs to be tracked and managed, so pretty much everywhere. And that could be things like training materials for for HR teams. It could be deals and offers for marketing teams. We have vendors and agreements that are tracked by finance. So even conceptual things like roadmap items. We have customers who track this in assets. So it's really anything that is critical to the broader organization, and it's not just IT assets. And the second trend that we're seeing is the impact of poor data quality to an organization, where there's a number of reasons why data quality can be compromised. That could be the result of insufficient tooling and practices, particularly with increasingly large volumes of records. Or it could be a lack of clear accountability of who's in charge for keeping this maintained and up to date. And that's all posing really big risks to organizations, such as slowing down incident resolution times or degrading the quality of changes. So the quality of the data that the business is operating with, and the quality of data that's stored and managed in a CMDB, is really critical for it to fulfill its value proposition. And there's 2 things that are critical to ensure data quality. First, it's the accuracy of the data. And that's really where our recent AirTrack acquisition comes into play, where AirTrack, by aggregating the data across an organization, including the data that's in the CMDB, and then analyzing that data for issues or inaccuracies, such as gaps or differences between systems, AirTrack allows to initiate remediation actions, monitor the quality of that data, and really ensure that the data that's being operated with is complete, current, and accurate at all times. And the second piece of the puzzle is the data freshness. And that's really where the API-based connectors or integrations play a key role to allow for seamless centralization of data, especially when they also allow for regular syncs to help ensure that the data doesn't get stale and the customer is not operating based on outdated information. And we'll talk a bit more about our strategy for assets and the role of Atlassian Marketplace to ensure particularly the second part, the data freshness, a little later. But back to the market trends that we're seeing that influence our asset management philosophy. So the last trend that we are observing is the importance of connecting your asset data to workflows and the work that has to be done with that data, and using that as a real guiding principle when deciding what is the data that should live in my CMDB. We have industry statistics. I think it was a Gartner report that reported only about 25% of organizations derive value from their CMDB investments. And a big part of that reason is because they have the mentality that the CMDB should be the single source of truth for an organization that houses all of their data. What that means is that really quickly leads to a super cumbersome system of record that's absolutely overloaded with information, really hard to maintain. There's no clear responsibility of who's in charge. So it's really all ultimately compromising that data quality I was referencing earlier. But the most successful implementations of a CMDB that we are seeing are the ones where our customers are starting small, where they first consider what is the service management practice I'd like to enrich with asset information to bring value to my business, and then only capture the data that is necessary to fulfill that and grow that over time where needed. So our recommendation to thrive for, it is not that perfect, omnipotent system of records that houses all of an organization's data, but it's a CMDB that is complete enough to bring value. It balances investment on return, both short and long term, and one, very importantly, that embraces automation to trigger and enrich workflows with contextual information. And that is why where assets and Jira Service Management comes into play, because we really think that these trends I've just outlined are a huge opportunity for us, and assets is the tool that can help our customers achieve that vision. So for those that don't know, Assets was formerly called Insight. It comes from our Mindville acquisition about 3 years ago. And it's our asset and configuration management capability in Jira Service Management. So it fills that CMDB function natively within JSM. And it's available to premium and enterprise subscribers in cloud. It's also available to data center and servers on the way out, as we all know, but there's an app for server. And you can think of Assets as a database of anything that's valuable to you or your customer's organization. And it's a really powerful organization that allows our customers to map anything that's relevant to them and their teams, but then more importantly, display that as contextual information directly in the Jira ecosystem. And it's not just limited to Jira Service Management, but you can also display that on Jira Software and Jira Work Management. And it's so flexible, we see our customers use it to map the more traditional IT assets, so hardware, software, patch levels, very common. But we see a lot of examples where customers extending this across the entire organization. I'll flash up a few of those examples in a sec. But in addition to managing and tracking those assets and storing them, the customers can create relationships and interdependencies between all the different objects and then very easily visualize that. So imagine if you're trying to track down a root cause of an incident. You can just climb that ladder and look past those connections and find what may have been causing it in the first place. Or you're rolling out a change and you want to see what could be impacted by this change. You can even then leverage automation for Jira to automatically notify anybody that might be impacted by this change. And that's that last part, just on the introduction of assets, is really the power of automation for Jira, because you can trigger automated workflows based on object information, but also based on changes thereof. So that could be things like approval processes, escalations, or if an asset reaches a certain number in stock, you can automatically trigger restock orders. And as I mentioned, assets, it's not just for IT assets, but yes, you can bring in infrastructure like laptops, desktop servers, routers, switches, whatever you like. And it's a very common use case for our customers. But here's some examples of the other things that our customers store in assets, which might give you some inspiration of what you could build. People records is a super common example. You can think vendors, employees, suppliers, even external customer information we're seeing a lot. Our own sales teams, for example, use it to rate themselves based on their training completion and skill levels, so that when a sales rep is needed on a call, you can easily find the right person that should join that call based on their skill levels, or you can leverage automated workflows to automatically route that request to them. Facilities, another very interesting example. There could be things like buildings, offices, warehouses, and that could be assets themselves, or it could be contextual information on an asset, where particularly in a world of hot desking, finding the floor number or the room number of a certain item becomes very important. Practices and processes we're also seeing, which is very common in HR and compliance use cases, where in the modern way of working, there's an increasing number of documentation required to drive those workflows, and assets can be used to centralize that documentation and surface it at the right point in time to the employees to ensure that they are following the right process. And then last but not least, it's anything. We have customers who use it to manage engine control unit in sports cars. I spoke to a customer last week to manage energy facility systems through it. Gurneys in hospital we've seen. So there's really no limit of what could be tracked and managed in assets. And in addition to being this super flexible database that can house all sorts of assets, can be very deeply embedded into the Jira ecosystem and automated workflows, Assets is also a Jira native feature, and that comes with a number of unique benefits. For example, we're uniting teams on a single platform. So we're bringing delivery, operations, support, and in a world of enterprise service management, HR, finance, we're bringing them all onto one collaborative experience. So that avoids silos. It provides the teams the flexibility to run fast and operate with autonomy, but it also provides the business the reassurance that they are following certain processes and they can be confident that the work is aligned and consistent. We're also reducing the number of tools and systems that's needed in an organization, which reduces costs, it streamlines processes, it also streamlines changes, it avoids latency and any errors arising from juggling too many tools. Which then leads to the last point, which is really for the employees themselves. By reducing the number of overall systems and tools they are juggling, and we all know there's so many we're operating with day to day, but we're taking just one extra one out, which reduces the cognitive load, and it makes it easier for them. They've already wrapped their head around Jira. They know how complicated the setup is, but at least the terminology is consistent and the concepts are the same, and we're not throwing yet another one in the mix. And before I throw over to Anmol, to give us more the developer experience of how you could integrate with assets via Forge, I just wanted to set the scene a little and talk about our extensibility strategy for assets in cloud, specifically when it comes to import apps, so those apps that are bringing in data. And that's really important to us because we know that the objects and CIs that our customers are storing and operating with and assets, they don't originate in Jira. We know in cloud at least about 99% of those objects are coming through via imports, so they're coming from external systems. And whilst we do have ways of bringing data in through manual file uploads, we have APIs, we also have a native discovery tool, we don't have any native out-of-the-box integrations with third-party systems in cloud. So whilst AirTrack will be able to bring in some IT asset information, we do definitely still think there's going to be an ongoing need for those integrations, particularly those that go deep into specific systems, those that surface relationships between data, all those that really help drive ESM or enterprise service management use cases. And the key benefits to these integrations, why there's such a huge customer demand, are the first three I've flashed up here. So it's the accuracy of the data, where we're avoiding manual data entry errors. You don't have to juggle, extract, transform a CSV file manually. No, it can just be done programmatically. And it's the freshness of the data, where it's very easily to regularly sync data, particularly when that's also driven by automating that sync on a schedule, which just helps save resources. And for us in juggling the really huge customer demand we have for integrations, so there's a huge need for speed to market, with the sheer number of potential systems we could integrate with, particularly in a world of cloud, in a world of enterprise service management, and given the flexibility of assets and all the different things our customers are doing with it, we recognize that the Atlassian marketplace and our app developer community, such as yourselves, is really, really critical for us to help close that gap to our customers. So we've been on a mission to make app development for JSM assets as easy as possible, and we've done so particularly via Forge, and I'll throw over to Anmol now to walk us through how that could be done.
Thank you, Doro. Hello, everyone. I'm thrilled to dive into one of the most exciting developments in the Atlassian ecosystem. Today, we are focusing on the significant enhancements in Forge's capability, its newfound support for Jira Service Management assets. Please note that this is applicable only to JSM Cloud. Let's explore a real-world example that demonstrates the power of Forge in enhancing JSM assets management capabilities. Using this example, we'll see what should be kept in mind before building the app and then how to go about developing it. Imagine a situation where an organization has a wealth of hardware assets, each associated with multiple files. These could be maintenance records, warranty documents, software configurations, or any relevant files, data files. Now, this data resides in the external system outside of JSM. When building an app for asset management with JSM and Forge, it's crucial to start by conceptualizing flexible data models. Think of it as a customizing solution to fit your unique organizational needs. This approach allows you to define and structure your asset data, be it hardware, software, or other types, in the most effective way for your business processes. In the next step, we focus on data types. It's about identifying whether we are dealing with people, end user devices, IT infrastructure, or business related information. Understanding these data types is key as it shapes our data structure, database structure, and our interactions with data. Equally important is recognizing the relationships among these data types. For instance, how does an end user device connect to a person or IT infrastructure? Determining whether these relationships are one to one, one to many, or many to many is vital for an efficient and effective data model. Lastly, let's talk about data mapping. This is where we bridge the gap between our data where data is stored and how it's represented in assets within JSM. Data mapping involves linking data fields in your external database to corresponding fields in JSM assets. It's not just about moving data from point A to point B. It's about ensuring that data is translated correctly, maintaining its integrity and meaning in the new environment. Effective data mapping ensures that when you look at an asset in JSM, you are seeing a complete, accurate, and up-to-date representation of the data from your external systems. Now that we have understood what all should be kept in mind while building an app, let's see how the workflow of importing data and JSM assets look like. In the first step, we create an import source in assets and generate a container token. This token is crucial as it will be provided to the Forge app that's handling the import. It's a key that unlocks the door for data transfer. This step is automatically taken care by authorization and authentication in Forge. Once the Forge app verifies the container token, assets respond with dynamic links like the link to start import, get status of an import, or cancel import. These links are essential for continuing the workflow, serving as the pathways for data import and other import-related actions. Before starting the import, it's vital to submit the schema and mapping configuration. This step defines how external data will be structured and related within assets. Without this, the import source would report missing mapping and it will halt the process. With mapping set, we are ready to start the import. This is initiated by external app making a post request to a start import URL, which is one of the dynamic links generated in step 2. It's the moment when the data begins its journey to assets. Next phase involves the Forge application submitting data sets which it has imported from external sources and also report the progress of the job. It's a critical stage where actual content gets transferred, ensuring that assets is populated with new data. Finally, the Forge app requests the import execution status. It's a crucial checkpoint to confirm the successful completion of the import, marking the end of the data migration process. Let's bring it all together, what we have learned, and see a sample app in action. Right. So here, first step I'm going to do is create a schema, and I'm going to use the IT asset management template which we previously talked about. Here I'm giving the schema name as sample schema. Once the schema is created, inside this window I'm first going to set up the configuration in this schema by going into the import tab. So right now there is nothing. So the first step that I'm going to do is create the import. At the bottom you can see, so this is the Forge app that I have created, which right now is called Assets Import app. And for this example, I'm naming this import structure as hardware import because we're putting the hardware information. Once the import is created, right now the status is not configured. So we have to create the schema and the mapping, which I'm doing it by this configure app link that we get. So here's a sample form that I have created where you can mention the object type, the attributes, the child object types. So it is hard coded behind the scenes, but kind of like I filled up that form. And just to make sure of that, we have the hard drive and the file. So here you can see the data source field and a destination attribute. So this is like in the source, and this is how it will look like in the assets. So you can see hardware has ID and label, and file has the path and the size. So once I've imported the data, which right now it's a simple JSON file, but ideally it would come through an API. Once it's imported and you check the status, you can see that how many objects have been imported and how long it took. And just to double check that, I go back and you can see on the sidebar the object types that have been imported and the relationship between them. In this case, I set file as child having the child relationship with the hard drive, and you can see that 10 hard drives were imported and 30 files were imported. So now that you have seen the Forge app in action and an overview of how assets import work, we'll now highlight the key resources you will need to develop your own asset management app using Forge. Firstly, we have a guide on importing third-party data into JSM assets using Forge. It's an invaluable resource for developers looking to integrate external data sources with JSM. The page provides detailed instructions, best practices, and code examples to streamline the import process, ensuring you have all the tools and knowledge necessary for efficient and effective integration. We also have documentation for REST APIs for assets. It includes APIs for each stage of the import workflow we saw earlier and more. There might be times when the import process is long because there's a lot of data to import. To guide you on how your app can handle that, here's the documentation which will help you with it using the Forge async functionality. Although JSM assets give you the freedom to define your own data models, it is good to have a few recommendations, and that's why you now also have access to object schema templates like asset management, we just saw, people, and facilities right out of the box to help you get started. To build your own assets app, like we saw in the demo, you will need a Forge UI component. For that purpose, we are providing you assets import type component. We are also sharing the source code of the sample app we just saw in the demo so that you get an opportunity to play around with it and get started immediately. Next, we have a feature request form for JSM assets, a platform for you to suggest new features or enhancements, and your feedback is crucial in shaping its development. If you have ideas to improve JSM assets, we encourage you to submit them here and help us evolve the tool to better serve your needs. Our developer community forum for JSM assets is where you can ask questions and engage with our team and other experts. It's an ideal place for troubleshooting, getting advice, and sharing best practices related to JSM assets. Lastly, we have a post on our developer community, which has a list of all the resources that I just mentioned. So you can go and check it out from there. On to Doro.
Cool. Thank you. We're flying through this. We don't have much longer. And not too many people have left, which is great. So thanks, Amal. Also, thanks for improvising the video demo. That was a very last minute change, so thanks for bearing with us. All right, to wrap up, we'll do a quick summary, a recap, and then if we have time for Q&A, we'll do that as well. So starting with the Atlassian take on asset management and CMDBs, so those key considerations and recommendations we're giving to our customers. But as I said, we think they're very relevant for how to approach app development as well. Number one, flexibility is key. not only from the implementation perspective, where needs will evolve over time, things will change, and the customers should be ready for that, but also when it comes to the system that's chosen or how to design and architect a system. It will evolve over time, and can the tool at hand cater to this change? Very important. Secondly, we recommend starting with a specific problem and use case instead of going too broad too quickly, which leads to point number 3, which is don't include more data than you need. You can always build over time. You don't need to have everything in there from day one, but focus on the data that's really relevant to drive those key practices. And keep the goal of accurate enough in mind. What we're telling our customers is an accurate enough CMDB and is better than having no CMDB at all. And you don't have to be perfect from day one, but you can definitely build this over time. And finally, quick overview of the resources available. So starting with the ones that are more broadly on assets or JSM assets and asset management. For more information, you can head to Atlassian University, where we have a number of really great courses. Those were discounted earlier this year. As far as I'm aware, those discounts are here to stay, so there's no rush. The prices are reduced. We also have a white paper that came out earlier this year. I think I shouldn't call it new. It was in January. But it's great, and it has a lot around asset management itself, but also those key concepts and terminology in assets. What is an object type? What is the schema? Definitely go check that out. And then secondly, all combined on this QR code is those developer resources that Anmol's taken us through. So we have the developer documentation, which is available on developer.atlassian.com. That includes our asset documentation, including our APIs, particularly the external import APIs, but it also includes our Forge guides, the template app, and the guide on how to create long-running tasks, even tasks that go way beyond the 55-second invocation limit that we've heard a lot about at this conference. And then last but not least, it's no surprise to you, but it's our community. And that's in person, but it's also our online, the developercommunity.com, where it's really an invaluable resource to go and check out any workarounds, tips. How can you overcome a problem that you think is impossible to solve? We go there as well. If we speak to a customer where we know out of the box we can't solve it, but my first step would be checking out if anybody has done it on community, and then recommending customers to check that out as well. And with that, that is the end. There's the feedback form. Sorry, you can clap in a second. Please give us feedback, the good one and the bad one as well. So if we said things that you don't ever want to hear again, let us know and we'll shut up. So thanks, everyone. And we do have a bit of time, I think, Tiago.
Yeah, definitely. We have a bit of time for some Q&A. If you want to explore a bit more, I think we can do a bit of brainstorming, some questions.
And if not, as I said, we'll be over there joining you as well, so come chat to us. But yes.
Thank you for the presentation. How does one experiment with those enterprise features?
So there is a process to, well, there's free trials. There's also a process to get those extended, particularly it depends, I think it's a different process depending on where in the tier of partners you are. But the first step would be to do the trial. I believe you can get that extended to 30-day and then even beyond that as well. I think there's a form that you can submit, and if you grab me after, I can give you the link as well.
The link is you can find in the developer community post.
All right, there you go.
Another question from back here.
Hi.
Is there any plans of exposing the asset functionality through the REST API?
Oh, I was actually chatting to Tyler, one of our engineers here before, how we can make that happen. Because I know I've spoken to Therese from your team. I know you're very keen on it, and so are a lot of our partners. I can't give you anything specific, but we are trying to collate the use cases so we can build a business case to support it. So I would love to chat to you a little bit after.
Yeah, we can rally a lot of customers.
Awesome.
Supporting that.
Any other questions? No? Let's jump into the happy hour then. Thanks, everyone.